Today I will continue my story about the Second Arab-Khazar War. It was a battle between two worlds, two empires, the Great Eurasian Steppe and the Middle East, which changed the fate of countries and peoples in the Caucasus and beyond. So you are on the Amazing History channel, where you will learn a lot of interesting things about the history of the ancient world, the medieval East, and much more. Before I continue, please don't forget to support the channel through sponsorship on YouTube or Patreon. We would also appreciate your likes, subscriptions, and of course, kind comments. Let's get to the topic of this episode. The fall of Balandzhar was undoubtedly a painful blow to the Khazar Khaganate. However, the Arabs were unable to capitalize on their victory. The Caliphate was suffering from overexpansion, and its problems were further aggravated by internal turmoil. On other fronts, the Arabs suffered frustrating defeats, such as in the Battle of Toulouse in France, in the year 721, and during the so-called Day of Thirst in Mawaranar against the Turgesh in the year 724. All these factors led to the Arabs being unable to remain on hostile territory for long without reinforcements. Al-Jarrah asked the Caliph for help, but his requests were not granted. Thus, the lack of sufficient support led to the opportunities created by his initial victories being largely missed. Although the Khazar army suffered losses, it still posed a threat to the Caliphate's forces. Meanwhile, in the year 725, a new caliph, Hisham ibn al-Malik, came to power in the Caliphate. He decided to remove the popular Al-Jarrah from the post of governor, appointing his brother Maslama instead. Well, Maslama. Nepotism since the time of Uthman hasn't gone anywhere. Despite all his experience as a commander, Maslama turned out to be quite a poor administrator and a short-sighted politician. He was more interested in raiding the Byzantines in Anatolia than in preempting the threat from the Khazars in the north. Thus, for a couple of years, the Khazars were allowed to restore their strength without interference, while the Muslims were weakened by conflicts on many other distant fronts. This allowed the Khaganate to go on the offensive again and begin the second phase of the war. In the middle of the year 728, the Khazar army led by Barjil, whom we already know, moved toward the mountain passes of the Caucasus with a firm intention to take revenge. Maslama had to accept this challenge. Unfortunately, for all his skill, he was a commander accustomed to leading raids and conquests, and his inability to act in defense became fully apparent during the Khazar invasion. For example, he failed to establish contact with the local Armenian nobility and did not properly utilize their forces. Instead, he relied on his loyal Arab warriors, wasting them on secondary fronts. Trying to seize the initiative in the conflict, Maslama tried to stop the Khazar invasion by meeting them in open battle at the mountain passes of the Central Caucasus. In September 728, under pouring rain, an almost month-long protracted battle took place, which is why the campaign was called the Dirty Campaign. Arab sources, in a fit of propaganda, declared a great victory, apparently believing that since the battlefield was left to the Caliphate's troops, it meant they had won. But when returning to Georgia, the Arabs fell into an ambush by the same army they had supposedly defeated. Most of the army's baggage and pay were looted and carried off by Khazar horsemen. For the rest of the year, the Khazars carried out raids and looting throughout the Caucasus. Caliph Hisham, however, did not appreciate Maslama's victory, so he returned command to Al-Jarrah. The hero of the siege of Balandzhar, Al-Jarrah, eagerly set to work. At the start of the campaign in the year 730, he tried to repeat the strategy of his previous success. He set out north to invade Khazar territory again, near Tiflis, hoping to force them to fight on his terms instead of chasing them all over the Caucasus. However, this time Barjil ignored the challenge. In response, the Khazars attacked the Arab territories in Transcaucasia, gathering a huge army that included militias from all the tribes under the Khaganate's control. The Khazars managed to outsmart al-Jarak, bypass his army, and lay siege to Ardabil, the regional capital and the largest logistical center for the Muslims. The Khazars' success was aided by the fact that they were well informed about the location of the Arab troops. This information was provided to them by the ruler of Georgia. Now Jarak was forced to go to the aid of the besieged city. Jarak. The families of a significant number of Arab warriors were in Ardabil. Therefore, they had no choice but to try to break the siege, even though they were outnumbered. The battle lasted for 2 days, during which the best forces of the Arab army were killed. On the evening of the second day, as darkness fell, many of the survivors in the Arab camp from the auxiliary non-Muslim forces left the battlefield, realizing that the battle was lost. Jarak had no army left, and on the morning of the third day, the Khazars launched their final attack. According to legend, the commanders managed to stop the panic by calling on the soldiers to die for Allah, and the warriors fought to the death. Jarak himself was killed in the battle. The Khazar leader cut off his head and put it on a spear as a trophy. The Khazars also captured Ardabil and put its inhabitants to the sword. The defeat at Ardabil shocked the Muslims. The Caliphate was gripped by terror at the Khazar army, which was ready to advance deep into Syria or Iraq, and outrage over the killing and humiliation of their beloved commander. Maslama was given command again, but he had little time to prepare the army before the Khazars would march again in the spring. At the beginning of the year 731, Barjil and his army were moving towards Mosul. Small raiding parties separated from the main forces and scattered around the area to loot. Maslama had not yet finished assembling his army, so the concerned Caliph Hisham sent a commander named Sayyid ibn Amr al-Qarashi with an advanced detachment to counter the raiders. His actions proved more successful than expected, defeating the Khazar detachments one by one. Most likely, Barjil, after his victory over Ardabil, became too self-confident and did not expect that another army would challenge him so soon. When Said began attacking his numerous raiding groups one by one, no organized regrouping was undertaken by the Khazars to repel these attacks. Said also managed to recruit many fugitives and deserters from the defeated army of al-Jarrah, promising good pay and the opportunity to avenge their fallen commander. After several small victories over raider detachments, he launched a sudden night attack on the Khazar army besieging Mosul, managing to find and kill Barjil, forcing his scattered army to retreat completely. It turns out that Said succeeded where Maslama and al-Jarrah failed with much larger forces. He managed to achieve a complete victory and drive the Khazars into retreat across the Caucasus. This made Maslama jealous, so he arrested the victorious Said on charges of insubordination. Even the Caliph was forced to intervene in the situation, who released him and rewarded him. Ultimately, Said's victory determined the nature of the remaining 7 years of the Second Arab-Khazar War, promising offensives but few convincing victories and insignificant territories changing hands over a long period of time. The defeat at Mosul put the Khazars on the defensive, and at the end of 731, Maslama invaded their country. He managed to capture Balandzhar once again, but he couldn't leave a permanent garrison there as the Caliphate was severely overstretched. Nevertheless, despite the successes, Caliph Hisham was dissatisfied with Maslama's actions and in 732 appointed his brother Marwan ibn Muhammad as governor. Realizing the failures of his predecessors, Marwan made considerable efforts to secure the support of reliable local allies in the region. Thus, in Armenia, he elevated the Bagratuni dynasty, which would later produce legendary kings and queens such as David the Builder and Tamar the Great. In this way, Marwan created powerful proxies without the need for bloodshed, leaving the Caucasus under loyal rule and ready to repel further invasions. While Marwan was engaged in politics in Armenia, the Khazars were also not idle and worked on strengthening their ties with Byzantium. A dynastic marriage was concluded, which testified to the growing legitimacy of the Khaganate as a great power in the region. The war finally ended in 737 when the Khazars asked for peace after another Arab invasion led by Marwan. Although the capable Umayyad prince achieved several minor victories, the peace apparently resulted more from the mutual exhaustion of the two powers and the many other problems facing the Caliphate. To save face as part of the peace terms, Caliph Hisham proposed that the Khagan accept Islam. He seemed to agree, but no real conversion to this religion took place. The Khaganate also rejected Christianity, instead choosing a third path, Judaism. Did the Khazars adopt Judaism as a whole people, or only among a significant part of the ruling elite? The question is quite controversial, but references to the Khazars as one of the few powerful Jewish states begin as early as the late 8th century. As for the Arabs, the Umayyad dynasty soon had to face much more serious internal threats, which would eventually lead to their overthrow and the rise of the new Abbasid dynasty. I've already told you about this more than once on this channel. While both empires were undergoing major transformations, a fragile peace was established between them, which would soon be broken. But we'll talk about that in the next and final episode of this series. That's all from me. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.